Nick Petrovic, I want to welcome you to this little chat we're going to have for the next hour or so.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.
It's been an enjoyable morning that I spent with you to just get to know each other. But this is Nick Petrovic, who is the Chief Executive Officer and President of the American Dental Trade Association. And we're going to have an opportunity to spend a little time and find out something about this, which is very new to me and very interesting. And I think Nick's going to bring us a real fine story that we'll be able to use in the college library. First of all, I'll mention that Nick is not a native-born American. He was born in Vienna, Austria, of Russian parentage, and came to the United States in about 1950. And the first thing I'm going to have Nick speak about is his youth when he was in Vienna, and some of his role models, some of his experiences in early education, and about his initial arrival in the United States and some of his first thoughts and impressions of our country. Nick, would you give me a little on that now?
It's a pleasure, Bill. And I, first of all, want to extend my appreciation to you and the college for this opportunity. I consider it a privilege and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was born in Vienna, Austria. My father and mother were then living in Yugoslavia. Eventually migrated to Germany and came to this country in 1950. My early role models obviously would be my parents and my grandparents. My grandfather on my mother's side had been living in the United States. A fascinating background. He was born in Russia, migrated to Italy, was an artist, painted in oils and watercolors, sang in the opera, and came to the United States to work in the Metropolitan Opera House back in the late 30s, early 40s. And sponsored my family and I into the United States in 1950.
Right.
I had the advantage of not only his living in America, but introducing me to the United States and to a totally different lifestyle, value system, language, culture, which was very difficult for me in the beginning. And when I came here, of course, I spoke no English whatsoever. I spoke Russian, I spoke some Serbian, a little German. And in my early years, it was very difficult for me to be accepted by my peer group, of course, a peer group of 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And through some very difficult experiences early on in the United States, I made it a point to try to become as Americanized as I could, as early as I could, and to take advantage of what this country had to offer. And I always look back on those early years and the tremendous opportunities that I was offered and that my family was offered. My father was a major role model, as was my mother. My father passed away several years ago, and my mother's still alive, living here in the Washington metropolitan area. But my grandfather in the early years, in order to expedite my learning the English language, took me to movies. In addition to the schooling that I received in both the private and the public school system, he felt one quick introduction to a form of the American lifestyle would be the motion picture business, and I think that helped me gain a better understanding of this country and also to learn a language much easier. What helped me also, I think, were those teachers in the early years in a grade school and junior high school and eventually in high school who took perhaps special interest in me because I took education a little more seriously, I think, than some of my colleagues. And part of that, I think, is, again, attributed to my parents and the way in which my parents taught me what was important, right from wrong, and, again, the important values that one should subscribe to. So I enjoyed education very much. I enjoyed school very much, and eventually became very involved in athletics, and that helped propel me to college. I went to college on a basketball scholarship and also studied sociology and journalism. So I think I've had a lot of help from different teachers throughout the system, beginning, of course, in Germany. I only remember the last few years in Germany from 1947 until 1950. Very rigid, strict educational system. And that's really where I think my value system began, combination of parents and teachers in those early years. And this was in New York. We came to New York City, lived in New York until I
You
graduated.
mentioned you played basketball. You're a little short nowadays to play basketball. Don't you, with
Yes,
these
I
big
am.
pros now?
I was considered unique in those days. I was tall, and that was it was a great opportunity
That's
for me,
great.
because athletics, as you know, play an important part, I think, in the balance of an education. So,
Yes, indeed.
and team building.
Well, you went to university. You went to Monmouth College.
Went to
I
Monmouth
believe.
College in West Long Branch, New Jersey, a small private college,
Yeah.
about 1,200 students, and that was a tremendous advantage for me to be in a smaller environment where you got more personal attention from your teachers, and I think that was critical, because the size of the classes were much smaller. I think our largest class was maybe 35 or 40 students. You got more personal attention, and I think you took the courses a little more seriously because of that attention.
Well, while you were there, did you have the feeling, or did you have the desire, the ambition to enter into association management, or did that come after your graduation?
That came after. I knew nothing whatsoever about association management. I think the closest I ever came was in taking an economics course, and of course we used the Samuelson text, which was a primer in economics, and there was, I think, a one-sentence reference to the role of trade associations. My primary interest in college was journalism. I was very interested in pursuing a journalistic career, perhaps becoming a newspaperman. I was fascinated by journalism and took some sociology courses, and that was my prime ambition. Association management didn't enter my life until well after the service, and my first job, which was with Eastern Airlines, and that's when I first became aware of association management as a profession, per se. That was later on.
You were in the service.
I was in the service for not quite 2 years. I was in the Army. I was an officer in the Army, and almost went to Vietnam. I had some injuries as a result of playing basketball. I had several injuries that precluded my going overseas, and that was right after graduation from college. I graduated in 1964. And then I left the service in 1966 and came back to Washington. And my first job was with Eastern Airlines in there as a ticket agent. That's how I started.
That's public relations real quick.
Yes, absolutely. Public relations and patience.
Yes, and a lot of verbal cues.
Yes, all the time. That's part of it.
I noticed here on your CV, I was looking at that one thing came out very, very, well, I guess amusing. I don't know, but it's one of your early jobs that you had, that you were the president of the Packaged Ice Association.
Yes.
Now, I didn't know Packaged Ice had association, but give us a little background on that, because that's rather a clever story.
You know, they say there's an association for everything nowadays. That was my first CEO position, and it has a special place in my heart and in my career because of the opportunity that I was afforded by the membership. The Packaged Ice Association then was called the National Ice Association, primarily represented manufacturers of packaged ice, block ice, and also refrigerated units for the storage of ice. It was a fascinating job for me because we represented entrepreneurs, relatively small industry. I think the sales volume in those years perhaps approached $1 billion, maybe $800 and $900 million, which in itself I think a lot of people find staggering. People used to kid us and say, you know, how can you work for an organization that sells frozen water? And we used to laugh about that. But this was a very serious business, and their primary goals were to work with the supermarkets in this country, the convenience food stores, and obviously encouraging consumers to purchase packaged ice, and the difference between the quality of packaged ice versus the ice that you find in your refrigerator. We work with advertising companies and other firms, and of course you're looking at a business from which people earn a livelihood. There are hundreds of thousands of people that made their living manufacturing ice, processing ice, selling ice, displaying ice in supermarkets, and that was not only my first CEO position, but it also gave me a much better understanding of the importance of a trade group, a trade association, the role that a trade association can play in bringing the talents of an industry together in a common purpose, so to speak, goals and objectives, and reaching those goals and objectives. And for that particular industry at that part of my life, I think we both gained a great deal. I gained a great deal in terms of my experience in the association business, and I think the association and the membership enjoyed my contribution, and as evidenced by the fact that I still hear from many of the leaders of that association periodically. They call me, they ask me how I'm doing and where I am, and it was a very important part of my life.
Were you somewhat responsible for the change of name with the association?
Yes, I was. That's very nice of you to remember. I felt as part of our marketing strategy that if we changed the name from National Ice Association to Packaged Ice Association, people would gain a better understanding quickly as to what that meant, because national ice really was not definitive enough. Packaged ice, that's what is sold now in supermarkets, packaged ice, so that helped.
In the 70s was almost $1 billion a year.
It was almost $1 billion a year in those days.
Can you imagine what it is now?
It's
got to be astronomical.
Yeah. It's a very important industry also. It's not only in terms of, you have to remember that ice is a food product. People consume ice, so there were some health-related issues that were sensitive to the industry. Ice was used in a variety of ways in freezing fish. The fishery industry uses ice a great deal to make sure fish is kept frozen. Obviously, ice is used in the healthcare field for a variety of procedures. It's used in some parts of the country after they've put asphalt down on roads and highways to cool down the asphalt. So it has many, many implications, not just the ice you put into a cocktail. And that's the best.
Well, there was one other thing that I wanted you to mention briefly as your representative to the Dental Health Committee of the U.S. Olympic Committee.
Oh, that's
you spent some time there, and I'd like to hear just a little excerpt of that time and what you all did for the U.S. Olympic Committee.
We were approached several years ago as a result of a call I received from Dr. Bob Biddington, who was then the president-elect of the American Association of Dental Schools. And the U.S. Olympic Committee Training Center in Colorado Springs wanted to establish a dental clinic. The purpose of the dental clinic was to take care of any injuries or accidents that may occur in the process of athletes training in a particular sport. And they wanted to ask us if we could help set up the clinic, set up the operatories, and also provide dental products and the support for the clinic over the years. We set this up 10 years ago, and it's been enjoyable for me because what it basically has done, it has provided free screening service for student athletes that come through the Olympic Center as they're being identified to be potential elite athletes representing the United States in the Olympic movement. But also it provides us with an opportunity to get the American Dental Association involved, because the American Dental Association has established a cadre of volunteer dentists throughout the country who are then willing to treat the athlete when he or she returned to their hometown. So the purpose of the screening is, on a voluntary basis, is to make sure the athletes are taking care of their teeth, that they are embracing good oral health, and then to identify potential problems that their dentist in their local community can then take care of. I'm very proud of this because I think it shows another facet of the dental industry and the role that our industry and our members play for the good and welfare, I think, for the public at large, and in this particular case, the Olympic movement. Plans in the future are to perhaps establish dental clinics in some of the other Olympic facilities that are currently on the books. They're thinking of building one in San Diego. They have one in Lake Placid, and perhaps one in Indiana, and one in Southern California. So that's been it's been a lot of fun. I would have to say that first, particularly because of my background in athletics, limited background, but also because of how good we feel in introducing, I think, dentistry and the concept of good dental care to perhaps a new group a new grouping of the population.
Well, I think this is great because I firmly believe that the majority of the dental profession don't realize this happens, that they have this facility available through the U.S. Olympic Committee. No. That's great. That's wonderful.
Very limited group, obviously, the volunteer dentists.
Sure, but it's got to start someplace, and it probably will grow. And with this, we get a little more information out, disseminated over, and we may even get more volunteers to take
Absolutely.
care. That's what we're after.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, about 15 years ago, you associated yourself with the American Dental Trade Association.
Right.
And first of all, for the information of those who will be watching this film, I'd like to hear some of the objectives of the American Dental Trade Association. What are their objectives?
Well, the ADTA is celebrating its 111th year. We're very proud of that. We were organized in 1882. We represent both dental manufacturers, dental distributors, and the Dental Laboratory Conference, which is made up of the large chain dental laboratories. Our primary goal and objective is to represent the industry, monitor regulatory legislative initiatives, and to interpret potential regulations that may impact on the industry, to provide educational services, to provide market research, informational statistics, to also seek opportunities within the dental community to work with all of our customer groups, whether they be the profession, the educational, the academic side, the auxiliary side, and to make sure that we are considered a partner in progress in the area of the dental community. We have internal objectives and we have external objectives. Obviously, the internal objectives are to provide our members with the tools that make them function more efficiently as businesses, to protect and defend the industry, to make sure that we can bring from the industry the best talent that we have available to us in a consensus-building environment, to make sure that we are able to introduce to groups outside of the industry what is the role and objective of not only the trade association, but the role and objective of the dental industry as a whole, not as individual companies. So so we have several goals and objectives, and part of my frustration, I think, has been the fact that other than the leadership of the various dental organizations with whom we have a very effective liaison, and of course in the various regulatory agencies and in the halls of Congress, I would venture to say the average dentist is not aware of what the American Dental Trade Association does. And I think one of my own personal goals and objectives is that of the organization is to make more people aware of not only what we do as an organization, but the impact the positive impact that we try to affect in the dental community as a whole, but also to identify potential opportunities for individuals or organizations that are not familiar with what we do as to how they can perhaps work together with us in a variety of projects. So it's been a personal challenge and an organizational challenge. And, you know, we've survived for 111 years. I'm very proud of that. And we constantly are on the lookout for new programs, new services, and new opportunities. And I think that's important.
If you could get more involvement from the dental profession, that makes your job easier, though.
Absolutely.
And that's what you're striving to do, because most of the time, from my side of the fence, while we're saying, oh, the manufacturer charges too much money for his equipment, or this composite costs too much, or something, you know, we're more or less complaining instead of knowing and realizing what your association is doing to try to blend and meld things together. You have a unique position, which is not unlike a lot of association directors or executives, and you're in a position in a profession that you have many bosses. And I know this with board of directors and executive committees, and here you sit and you get it from all angles. Now, how do you feel the advantages of that, and how do you feel are the disadvantages of that? I'd like to hear some of your comments on that.
Well, it certainly is a challenge, and you're absolutely right. I think the number of bosses is directly proportional to the number of constituents that we represent. In our case, we represent corporate entities, and we have about 250 member corporate companies with subsidiaries, and it becomes a little bit difficult. I think the way I try to approach it is that I bring to the association skills as an association professional who spent more than 20 years as an association manager, not only actively involved in my professional society, but also trying to bring those skills to the ADT, and that's the purpose for which I was hired. The unique challenge, I think, that we have is trying to tap into our membership and bring the best talent that we have available to us from the industry to the table, so we can develop a consensus, so we can develop a coalition, and in turn bring the best brain power that we have access to for the good and welfare of the industry as a whole. And that, of course, flows over into the dental community in general. So the exciting part about it is that I have access to the best talent in our industry, both domestically and internationally. That is exciting. I like the fact that at a given moment I can pick up the telephone and call the president or the CEO of the major dental companies internationally and solicit their help and assistance in helping make the association even better than it's been, and to make things happen, so to speak. At the same time, I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm an employee. I'm a custodian of the American Dental Trade Association. That my prime goal and objective is to implement the policy that's established by the voluntary membership of the organization through the committee structure, through the board structure. We have, when you talk about voluntary leaders, we have approximately 125 voluntary members serving in various committees and various boards. We have 15 committees, 3 boards, and a parent board of directors. And I think the process of consensus building and the process of trying to channel the energy and the ability and the intellect of the best minds in the dental industry into a specific project-oriented activity, I find very exciting. I also find occasionally it becomes not only challenging, but occasionally becomes a problem. I think the problem is being able to somehow ensure, or for that matter, manage individuals who can leave their own personal beliefs and feelings and corporate goals and objectives outside of the door of the American Dental Trade Association and work for a common purpose and a common good. And occasionally, I think, in any organization which is made up of volunteers, sometimes individual aspirations, individual agendas surface. And I think the challenge that we have is to make sure that they're channeled into a positive, constructive direction, that, you know, it isn't an organization represented by one individual. It's a consensus of all of the members of the association. So that has challenges. It's fraught with pitfalls. You have to be very careful as to how you channel those energies and those abilities. And I think that's why I stay in this business. I think that's what excites me about the business, the ability to bring the best that we have to offer and help the American Dental Trade Association, in turn help the entire industry.
Not too many dull moments.
Not at all, not at all. Well,
of course, you scared the living daylights out of me when I heard you were in Chicago last night.
Yes, I was. Yeah, occasionally we have those challenges.
You had to do that, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? Be talking to myself or what? In your capacity as the CEO and president, what's your perception of the attitudes and the relationship? Let's put it this way, between the association and the profession of dentistry, from your standpoint.
It's an excellent question, Bill. Let me answer it in a number of ways. I think there exists a general misconception among the average practitioner as to the role of the industry. Let me separate the industry from the association. Right. I think the perception is, and again I'm talking about the average practitioner, when doctors attend their component state, regional, local, national, organizational meetings, their perception of the industry is that these are the men and women that attend trade shows, they work the booths, they support the organizations by virtue of buying exhibit space and promoting their products to us through the avenue of a trade show. The other perception of the industry is that these are the men and women that advertise in various journals, advertise their products in various journals. And outside of the leadership of the various organizations, where the members of our industry do a lot more than just advertise and support trade shows, I think the perception is a limited perception. Sometimes I've said that when I'm introduced to someone that has not been actively involved in dentistry, they say, well, if you've been around for 111 years, how come I've never heard of you? And I sometimes say, maybe that's another challenge we have to take care of. But unfortunately, limited financial resources, limited manpower resources do not give us an opportunity to reach out to the 140,000 practitioners that we have in this country. So we try to work through the various organizations, through limited committees, through boards, on specific projects that eventually I think will benefit dentistry as a whole. So my goal has been one of trying to reach out, and reaching out through the media, through the electronic media, through the print media, and to try to get our message across to a larger population in dentistry. There are a number of ways that I think we can do that, and that we have done that. For example, we are one of the founders of the American Fund for Dental Health. The American Fund for Dental Health has been in existence almost 40 years. It is considered by many to be the United Way of dentistry.
Just back up.
You back up a little bit.
Not the United Way of dentistry. That's okay.
Yeah, recently that has a bad connotation. You're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Stick with the American Fund for Dental Health.
Yeah, let's stay with the American Fund for Dental Health.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's another story. We'll get into it. But in the case of the fund, our companies, again, representing the industry, have donated in excess of $5 million over 40 years. And that supports a variety of projects, dental scholarships, dental research, various projects throughout the country. So I think those that are aware of what the fund does, and also the American Dental Association is a founder, as is the American Association of Dental Schools, I would venture to say that probably in the last 10 or 12 years, more people are aware of what the fund does, who the components of the fund are, than ever before. And as we get involved in various projects, I think the base begins to spread, and more members of the profession become familiar with what the industry does, let alone the role that the American Dental Trade Association plays
Yes.
in that responsibility. And I find that very exciting because I think it can change the general perception. You know, I've often heard people say to me, well, you know, I know what the industry, all those salespeople that bother me throughout the day. I've got patients in my office, and every 15 or 20 minutes my assistant runs in and says such and such is here, and he didn't make an appointment, you know, and he didn't call in advance. So that is part of the problem. On the other side of the coin, I think it's well recognized that we as an industry over the years have made major contributions in concert with recommendations from the profession on the advancements that you've seen in dentistry as a whole, high-speed handpiece, and some of the other major introductions, some of the new composites, some of the new materials. I am very proud to say that doesn't just generate from the industry. That's a collaborative effort between the profession and the industry. A lot of times a doctor will turn to one of our salespeople or middle management representatives or top management, and they'll make a recommendation on how this widget can be made a little better or more effective. And we take that seriously because those are welcome suggestions that provide us with the opportunity to make a better mousetrap, so to speak, down the road. So, you know, so I think part of that is communication also, a better way to communicate with the profession.
I had a personal opportunity along that line back when S.S. White was a tremendous, wonderful dental manufacturer. When the board and air rotor first came out, I had one of the first, and they were very kind to correspond with me and send detailed men by to see what I thought of it. And I came up with two suggestions. One was a variable speed foot control, and one was a heater to warm the air and water. So I had an opportunity to work with S.S. White for a couple of years, and not that I had anything to do with it, but just like you said, they come to the dentist and say, hey, how do you like it? And we throw in a pitch, and sure enough, they go to work on it, and it comes out. So my equipment now has warm air and water and a variable speed.
And I also think, Bill, I think one of the problems is when you look at the educational system, one of the areas that we're very proud of and we like to see more of is the amount of time that is devoted in dental schools to the curriculum relative to practice management, the business of dentistry. I know that when I first came on the scene, we were just getting involved in providing some funding to the American Association of Dental Schools on developing some curriculum guidelines on practice management. And I was somewhat surprised and quite frankly appalled to hear that during a 4-year period, a graduating student had less than 12 hours of education on the business of dentistry. And sometimes also there's been some criticism as to our role as an industry by members of the faculty that's established, that's well known, and the student graduates from dental school and in some cases is not properly prepared to deal with not only salespeople, but for example on the distributor side of our association, distributors not only sell products and service products and introduce products, but distributors are very important in identifying real estate space, in designing office space, in developing an office in concert with members of the profession, not just saying, please buy this, and I'm going to make 35 calls today, and I'm going to see how many dentists I can get to buy, you know, when I make those calls. I think there's a much greater role we play that, of course, on a local basis in many pockets of this country is well established. But somehow we need to expand the awareness of the multifaceted role of the dental industry beyond just exhibiting, selling, and advertising. It's a much greater role.
It's, I think there's a little bit of suspect maybe with a young graduate coming out when one of the local dental dealers comes to him and wants to help him, and being very sincere about wanting to help him with the location and what the traffic is, and to get him started, that there may be an ulterior motive of, I don't know, he may want to sell me, overload me on equipment or something, but that comes, I think, and if the dealer's up front and honest about it, why, he'll have a customer the rest of his practice. And
exactly. And I think to a very large extent they are. And I think we as individuals, and I know I personally am very sensitive to the demands on the new practicing dentist, the first-year practicing dentist. I'm well aware of the debt load that most students incur when they graduate. And we were, as a matter of fact, one of the things, I'm glad we're on the subject, because one of the things we are very proud of for approximately 20 or 25 years, the ADTA used to have a student loan program. We provided loans to students who were in need with I think a very comfortable payback opportunity, so that after you received the loan and you graduated from dental school, you didn't have to pay back that loan until maybe a year or two after you set up your practice, to kind of ease the financial burden. And this was worked through the dental schools. We usually would provide an amount to the dean of a dental school, and the dean within that academic environment would select a worthy student to be the recipient of that loan. Right. So I'm very sensitive to recognizing that you finish 4 years of college, you finish 4 years of dental school, you have this tremendous bill that you're facing, or bills that you're facing, and then you're trying to establish a practice, you're trying to market your practice, and you have a debt load, and you're trying to make sure that your first year is successful, and here comes the salesperson, right. and not only one but many, and the difficulty of trying to decide amongst the barrage of not only telephone messages, but fax messages, but computer messages, personal visits, and you're trying to build a practice, and you can only devote so many hours beyond dealing with your patients to dealing with the outside entities. So it's difficult. I understand.
It gets more difficult every year because there's more nice things to look at. When I started practicing, there wasn't that great variance of
no, absolutely.
Of materials and equipment, and it's been so fantastic over the last 40 years. The things that we have.
We're very proud of what the industry's done.
On the screen, you can look in a patient's mouth, put the wand in there, and show them what they have, and I think that's going to help the quality of dentistry, because if you show them what they have beforehand, you better show them what's later, and it better be good. So,
and I also think the challenge that we have is you have a much better educated public.
Yes,
I think you have a public that has come out of an educational system where you're learning about flossing, for example, and brushing your teeth at a much earlier stage. When I was a young kid, I remember my teachers telling me about brushing your teeth, and later on I think they talked a little bit about flossing, but not to the degree that you have today. And this I think is another side of the industry that I think people sometimes skim over rather quickly. When you see an ad on television for a toothbrush or toothpaste or mouthwash, I think people have to look beyond just the glitz and the glamour of a particular ad. I think they have to look at what is the potential impact of that product, regardless of the brand name. The substance of that product is going to be a contributing factor to your having a good, healthy oral cavity, and that is the ultimate objective. Obviously, part of the marketing program is to sell products, but the ultimate objective is to have a healthier oral cavity. So I think sometimes people need to address the beneficial part of advertising as it relates to healthcare, as it relates to dentistry. So I think the challenge that we have is when a patient walks into a dental office, they expect new innovations. Right. They expect, obviously, the dentist and his or her team to make sure they have the best possible facility, a barrier-free facility, a comfortable facility. But I think also, if you're going to give people digital clocks and remote-controlled TVs and automobiles that start and stop without a key, you better translate that into other aspects of our society.
And it's the little guys that watch this very, very closely.
Yes.
You mentioned the barrier control. I walked in my office the other day and had a 6-year-old in the chair, and I just walked up to him to say hello. He immediately looked at me and says, "Where are your gloves?"
Yeah, exactly.
6 years old.
Exactly.
He's been watching. And
that's a challenge. I think the public, a better educated public, is challenging not only the dental profession, but definitely the dental industry. And I think this comes under the umbrella of patient confidence. You have not only you want to make sure you build on patient confidence, but that you have an educated public that are now raising questions that they never raised before.
That's right. I know you've been associated with the dental profession, so to speak, in your capacity the last 15 years. Now, prior to that, let's say 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, after World War II, it would be almost unmentionable to use a Japanese or German product. Now, here of recent years, what is the impact of these foreign products and equipment on the American market now?
Well, it's an interesting question because the answer is multifaceted. We have seen in recent years the balance shift between the import of dental products from other countries into the United States to now where exports are beginning to outweigh imports because of the challenge that I think international companies posed for American manufacturers. An interesting example would be that if you look at the history of the American Dental Trade Association, within my lifetime, within the last 15 years or so, we've seen more foreign-owned companies become not only start businesses in the United States, but become involved in the American Dental Trade Association. And when our leadership prior to my coming on board saw what was coming down the road, they revised their bylaws to make it possible for foreign companies to be members of the American Dental Trade Association, providing they had an office in the United States or had a license to do business. I think what it's done is, I think clearly, it's offered an alternative for the members of the dental profession. I think if the goal for a global industry, and I think we're now using global, we're looking at all industries in a global sense. If you're looking at the global part of the dental industry, I think it behooves all of us, whether we have American manufacturers or foreign-owned companies, to provide the best possible dental product that we can for the use of the practitioner. And therein, I think there's been a challenge to companies that may have been a little bit lax or a little slow in putting more money into research and development, and taking perhaps companies from Europe and from the Orient as seriously as perhaps they should have. Mm-hmm. As a result, I think the record shows some companies who did not pay attention to that have gone out of business. Other companies have expanded dramatically because what they have done is they've taken the challenge seriously. They have put more money into R&D. They also began to look offshore for the consumption of their products. If you look at an industry that is not quite a $2 billion industry. In the United States, I think the volume of sales is about $1.8 billion when you look at the United States and Canada. Obviously, companies that wish to not only expand, but take advantage, for example, of the EC and take advantage of the tremendous emerging market in the Orient, they have to establish not only contacts overseas, but they have to seriously consider selling products overseas if they're going to survive and if they're going to be in the big game, so to speak. So it's been, I think, a welcome challenge to many companies because I think it woke up a few companies into realizing all of a sudden there was another kid on the block. Yeah. And this kid was a competitor, and he may take a little market share away from you. So that, I think, stimulated companies to get more actively involved, particularly those that had not been involved overseas in recent years. I think also it's given us an opportunity on a global basis to deal with oral health, not just as a domestic issue, but obviously the concern over AIDS and HIV and infection control and the sepsis has become an international issue. It's no longer just a regional issue. So I think we're all in this together, and the industry has shrunk. Fewer companies are involved, and they have to be better to meet the challenge that we're all facing.
You see that for the future, more and more consolidation?
I think you'll see more consolidation. I think you'll see more mergers. I'm not at liberty to discuss this because I've received this information confidentially, but yesterday I received a phone call from one of our major manufacturers informing me that another major company had just merged with this company. So we've seen a lot more of that. Mergers, acquisitions, definitely is a wave of the future.
Your personal, you were talking, I think, in generalities with the association or with the... Yes. What are some of your personal goals that you would like to see implemented in the future before you leave your before you leave your position?
Do you know something I don't know?
No.
Well, this may sound like a cliche, but I really love my job. I love my job because I've been very fortunate in my career to have worked for some giants in the association profession, and subsequently when I joined ADT, I had the pleasure of meeting some of the giants in the dental profession. I was very fortunate in my early years to meet Dr. Harold Hillenbrand, who everyone knows is recognized as a giant in dentistry. The gentleman that introduced me to him was Bernie Beasley, who was then formerly general counsel of ADA, who was then working as general counsel for the Dentsply Company. And And Bernie was my mentor. He took me around the world of dentistry, introduced me to major figures in dentistry, the Maynard Hines, the Harold Hillebrands, and many others. So what I would like to do personally is to now begin serving as a mentor. I think I know a lot more about the dental profession, a lot more about the dental industry, having spent 15 years as the manager of ADTA. And I think it's important for me to take those collective skills, those collective experiences, and somehow channel them into what we can do as an association better than what we did in the past. To use some of the legacies that we've been left with that the younger generation is not aware of. The younger generation today, the only reference they have or the experience with Harold Hillebrand would be if they have a meeting in the Harold Hillebrand auditorium at the offices of the American Dental Association, or if they read the biography of Harold Hillebrand. So I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned by leaders in dentistry if we make sure we keep their names alive, their reputations alive, and the contributions that they made to dentistry alive to pass on to future generations. And I think I have that responsibility to look back in our industry and pull out the highlights of the contributions that members from the industry have made, and make sure people do not forget the contributions, because those contributions serve as a foundation that we've built programs and services of the association on. We recently involved ourselves in a project that I'm very proud of. It's called the Introduction to the Dental Industry. It's an 8-hour video program which is designed primarily to educate the newcomer to the dental industry, salespeople, let's say, from other disciplines, as to the terminology of the dental community, the terminology of the dental industry, and give them a quick crash course combining their unique selling skills with a better understanding of the customer group that they're going to be selling to. So I think part of my personal objective and the organizational objective is to expand the education that we provide to our industry. I think we need to expand the relationship we have with all of the constituents of the dental community, because we're really in this together. Particularly because of the challenges that have been thrust on us by the regulatory agencies. I'm very aware and very sensitive to the role of OSHA, for example, in all of our lives in recent years. We were regulated as an industry in 1976 by the Food and Drug Administration. Prior to that, through the American Dental Association voluntary compliance program, our members would regulate products on a voluntary basis. But in recent years, the impact of OSHA, not only on our industry, but particularly on the practitioner, has revolutionized the way in which I think the practitioner will be doing business in the future. It's raised their costs dramatically. I think in some instances, perhaps people are somewhat skeptical as to whether or not they want to go into the dental profession. There we turn into career opportunities. We've been involved with the American Dental Association and the American Association of Dental Schools in their SELECT program, which I think is a unique program designed to educate young men and women into the possibility of careers in dental education, into the dental industry. I really feel personally that people shouldn't shy away from our profession, our industry, because either it's becoming too expensive or there's some challenges being thrust at us. I think there's a purpose for that, and I think eventually we can be better for it. We can be a better industry. I think we can be a better profession. It's difficult now because it seems that every other day another inspector from another regulatory agency knocks on your door, and you're now immersed in paperwork. I've talked to many friends in the profession that say, when are we going to treat patients? We spend so much time filing papers and taking care of bookwork and trying to keep one step ahead of the sheriff, so to speak, that we're not able to do what we went to dental school for, and that is offer dental care to the patient. So it's a lot of challenges, and I think with that come a lot of opportunities. As you said before, I don't think we'll ever have 140,000 dentists aware of what the ADTA does, but I think I like to carve out larger chunks of the dental population to make them more familiar with the important contributions we make as individuals. And
well, it's wonderful to hear, from my standpoint, the amount of involvement that you're already in, and I think with what we're doing here will help in the long run too.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to take a moment here for a break.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Nick, if you had the opportunity, or it was within your power, what big change would you personally like to see in your association, in your organization as the Chief Executive Officer?
Well, actually, two things. I'm very concerned that perhaps we haven't done a good enough job within our own industry to have more companies support the organization. That's a major problem. We have, if you look at the manufacturing side of our association, we represent about 65 to 70% of the volume of business that's done. On the distributor side, 90%. On the laboratory side, about 60%. I don't think we've gotten our message across. You know, I've talked about all of the good things we've done and the things we continue to do in identifying new projects. But I'd like to, because the concern that I have is that everything we do for the benefit of the industry, and yet there are companies out there that benefit from what we do without supporting the association. That's a great concern to me. By virtue of being in the industry, they benefit from what we do. If we can get more companies supporting the organization, it would provide us with a more expanded financial base where we could add more staff people, and I would like to get out more into the country and talk to more people about our story and what we do. As an example, if occasionally I could have an opportunity to talk to members of the dental profession at a forum at one of the major dental meetings, I'd like to be able to have the luxury of time to spend 45 minutes or an hour telling our story.
Right.
And I think in a period of maybe 2 or 3 years, more people would be aware of the contributions that we've made and the role that we've played. So the concern that I know our membership committee has, our board has, and I certainly have always had is why is it that certain companies, while aware of who we are and what we do, have not elected to join us and support us, both financially as well as with the talent that they have within their corporations. That membership recruitment, membership retention is probably the #1 challenge we have. All of the other programs and services are always going to be there, but that's the frustration that I have, and we're working towards solving that. But it's been an awfully long road, and that's one of the things I'd like to be able to change.
We have that same problem with the American Dental Association, and strangely enough, it's the figures are pretty close. That we can't understand why we don't have a bigger support from the practicing dentists,
Exactly.
from the parent organization, because we wouldn't be where we are today if it weren't for a parent organization. We'd be very fragmented, I'm sure.
Well, you know, it's interesting. If obviously, if you look at 111 years, we've done something right. When I joined this association back in 1977, our operating budget was about $300,000. It's now over $1 million. So obviously over the years we've done something right, and the members have supported us, and our membership has grown in some instances. But at the same token, going back to an earlier point, because of mergers and acquisitions and companies going out of business, we've also lost some of our base. We have a small base to begin with. This is not a very large industry. It's a very, very small industry. So you're dealing with a small base to begin with. And of course the expense of supporting organization becomes greater each and every year. And as companies begin to look at how they're going to use their discretionary dollars, some may or may not choose to support an organization, because support is beyond just dues. You know, you can be a checkbook member or you can be an active member in an organization. And when you start looking at your level of activity, as your level increases, your financial commitment increases proportionally. And then it becomes very, very expensive. And then we have the challenge of responding to people that say, what have you done for me lately?
Right.
You know, that's kind of inbred in the association profession. What did you do for me today? I don't want you to tell me what you did 15 years ago. What are you going to do for me tomorrow?
Right.
So, yeah, so that makes it kind of exciting.
Well, you're talking a little bit along the lines I was going to question you next. Was in your 15 years as Chief Executive Officer of this association, how do you see it 15 years ago to now, and projection in the future? A little comparison. You hit on it just a little bit. Your budget was 300, then it's up to $1 million. And do you want to embellish on that a little bit? Or?
I think the major change is from 15 years ago, obviously, is a financial pool, that an expanded financial pool budget that has allowed us to provide more programs and services. And by providing more programs and services, we appeal to a wider range of constituents. We're able now, when we promote our organization to show perhaps several pages of programs and services versus maybe 2 or 3 pages. So we have a number of issues that we provide that I'm very proud to sell to a prospective member of the association. So expanding our budget has provided an opportunity to expand our staff, provide more programs and services. So that has been healthy for the last 15 years. I think as we look into the future, the turn of the century, and where we go beyond that, I think we have to be on the watch to ensure that membership retention is critical to us. You can't just assume that a company's been supporting you, that they're going to be supporting you forever. One of the sensitivities I have, and I think my colleagues have in the association management profession, is the concern that the personal relationships that we used to build on in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s as we entered the profession of association management are no longer applicable to today's fast-paced global world, where the executives that are signing your dues checks are a much younger breed. You could probably look 15, 20 years ago, and the average age of our membership may have been in the late 50s, early 60s. You're looking at now an average age that probably is in the mid-50s, low 50s, late 40s. The other challenge we have is that members who belong to the American Dental Trade Association also belong to other organizations. And the challenge there is they begin to make comparisons. They look at all of the organizations that could serve their interests, and if this organization on my left is doing a better job, they'll tell me about it. Or if this organization on the right, they'll say, Nick, how come we can't do this? And why is it that this organization is doing this for me for less money? So we are competing with other organizations. There was a time when I would be proud to say that we're the only organization representing dentistry, but we're not. There is another organization, a smaller organization representing the dental industry, and there are other organizations representing dental health interests, whether they're in the medical device arena or they're in the educational arena or in the human resources arena. So the challenge is no longer for us to ensure that we're providing a good return on the investment, but we now have other organizations that are competing not only for my members, but also for my members' dues dollars and for my members' individual talent. So that's a major challenge. So I see that coming down the horizon. The concern I have over the increasing cost of doing business. To be competitive domestically, to meet the challenge of foreign competition, to meet the challenge of the regulatory impact that our industry has had and the ancillary costs related to being in compliance with the various regulations that we're facing. All of a sudden, those expenses begin to pile up. And no longer does membership look as attractive as it did perhaps 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. That's a major challenge. So we have to constantly go back to the drawing board, constantly audit existing programs, and quite frankly, Bill, perhaps do away with programs that are obsolete. I think it's very difficult to take a program that you've had for many years and particularly tell the member that was responsible in developing that program that it's no longer useful. We have to do that. We're auditing ourselves probably on an annual basis. There was a time in my early career in the association business where strategic long-range planning committees would meet every 5 years and sketch out a 5-year plan, maybe a 6 or 7 or 8 year plan. We're now sketching out 2-year plans, maybe even 1-year plans. Things are changing so dramatically and rapidly in dentistry as a whole and in our industry that we can no longer afford the luxury of not only resting on our laurels, but we have to be visionary to anticipate problems that none of us can point to now, but we know are around the corner. And we better be able to meet those challenges. Particularly some of the problems our members are facing. Members are facing challenges from all of the regulatory agencies, not just FDA. OSHA, EPA, the Interstate Commerce Commission, the Interstate Transportation Department. So we have a lot of new buzzwords that translate into organizations that impact on the cost of doing business. So
you're a great mental telepathist. What are your thoughts concerning the effects of OSHA?
Oh boy.
CDC and the EPA. See, you're just beginning to come into it, and that was the next thing I was going to ask you about. The effect on your industry and our industry as a profession in the future, in the next few years. What do you see in the horizon?
I think the problem that we faced is there's no denying the tragedy of the men and women that have died as a result of the AIDS epidemic, and I think we all we all reach out to their families, and I think a death is a death and it's tragic in its dimension. But I think what I'm concerned about is having the dental profession and the industry singled out, and having what I think is a burdensome regulatory impact that has been placed on both the dental profession and the dental industry. I think if you look historically as to the role that the profession has played and the industry has played, we have a very, very proud safety record over the years. And it's unfortunate that the media has taken true, they're tragic cases, but they've taken tragic cases that are relatively isolated when you look at the history of the way in which the profession and the industry has worked hand in glove in treating the patient public. And I think those cases are isolated, and they've blown it out of proportion, I think creating, number one, a major panic among the patient public, which I think is unnecessary. And secondly, I think you have, again, the continuing problem of regulatory agencies that in their desire to draft regulations and in their opinion make an impact or make a difference. I think they've put the cart before the horse. I know one of the problems we have had is that legislation is introduced, regulations are introduced, and in many cases I know our industry is living under the thumb of regulation, even though the regulations have not been finalized yet, because they haven't assessed the economic impact. They haven't assessed whether or not the regulation is necessary. And I think that's a tragedy. We have done, and I know the American Dental Association and other members of the community have done, I think, a dramatic job in bringing that message to the regulating agencies and to the individuals involved. And unfortunately, some listen and some respond, and some do not listen and do not respond. But I think we collectively have been hit by regulations. And of course, part of the problem is you have, unfortunately, finger pointing gets involved. And I think you have different constituents pointing fingers at each other, trying to pass the blame on to someone beyond the government, and it's beyond the government and beyond the lawyers. And I think that has to be erased. I think we have tried very hard to again, be a partner in progress, to work together with the members of the dental profession and making sure that we live up to our responsibility. And after all, one of the messages I've always tried to relate, Bill, is that we are a regulated industry. One of the difficulties that I have had is some of the unfortunate criticism that has been leveled at the dental industry for what is perceived to be a failure to properly provide the type of information that the profession needs. And I've always maintained that because we are a regulated industry, if our companies do not properly respond to the regulations, they're out of business. So, we're not in a situation where we are deciding should we or shouldn't we not comply with the regulation. We absolutely have no choice. I think the frustration of our customers, and we have a multi-customer group, laboratories, members of the profession, the auxiliaries. I think sometimes it's an educational problem. And it's an educational problem we've worked very closely with the American Dental Association to try to solve, to have it clearly understood what is the role of the industry, what is the responsibility of the industry, and to try to put aside some of the rumors that exist, some of the unfounded criticism that exists, and I think that's going to be one of our major challenges. I think eventually we're going to have to do a better job in working together to communicate to the 140,000 dentists our respective responsibilities and where do all of us fall in terms of the overall responsibility of meeting OSHA regulations, meeting EPA regulations. That's a massive, massive job. In the meantime, the problem you're faced with is the dentist and the dental team that is dealing with this on an hourly and on a daily basis. They have to comply with the regulations. They're concerned about, when is the next inspection going to come? So that is, I think, an additional stress factor that has been introduced into the practice that none of us really needed. We certainly, as an industry, didn't need it, because as we begin to comply with the regulations we're faced with, obviously that's a cost factor. We've been very careful about increasing the costs, the pass-along costs, in order to make products more marketable, to make products more affordable. But eventually, as the cost to us increases, the cost has to be passed along. And then obviously the members of the profession have to pass the cost on to who? The public. So I think at some point in time, we're going to have to bring into the game plan the public. And I think the public could be a great value to us in terms of if we're on one side of the coin selling the message of the need for you to get involved in a good oral health program, I think the public asks us at what price. So I remember when the medical device amendments were passed in 1976, we sat down with various representatives of the dental community and worked together in presenting a position to the FDA, and they were very, very helpful, instrumental. Dr. John Stanford, I'm reluctant to single people out, but Dr. John Stanford, who for 40 years has been the director of the Council on Dental Materials, Instruments, and Equipment at the ADA, was very, very helpful in working with us. He, of course, was then a representative from the American Dental Association to the FDA Dental Classification Panel. He worked with us in presenting our story to the FDA, and in particular talking about the economic impact that these regulations were going to eventually have, not only on the practice, but on the patient public. So I think that is going to continue to be a major challenge, and that goes beyond OSHA. That goes into all of the other regulations. And eventually it's going to have an impact on reimbursement and the willingness of insurance companies, and the concern that I have is to what extent are insurance companies going to be willing to reimburse dentists for procedures that are going to become more prohibitively expensive over the years.
Do you see anything on the drawing boards in the near future or for the remaining years of this century, and any major changes in dental equipment or for the armamentarians in handpieces or sterilization procedures, something other than something fantastic other than the autoclave? I know in Oklahoma been working on the microwave to do, but it's kind of gone, I don't know where, but I haven't heard much about it. But have you heard anything? It's major changes.
I'm not familiar with any major dramatic changes short term. I think you'll see changes, for example, the continuing controversy about the safety of dental amalgam. Obviously, companies have not only developed new composites and new materials, and they're continuing to work on a possible alternative, although you'll hear many people in our industry, myself included, that I personally do not have a problem with a dental amalgam. I've got several amalgams for many, many years, and I think the jury's still out as to some of the criticism that has been leveled. There really has not been, in my opinion, any bona fide scientific proof to show that dental amalgams are unsafe. But I think at the same token, not because of the amalgam controversy, I think in an attempt to provide alternatives, long-term alternatives, perhaps more affordable alternatives to dentists and eventually to the public, I think you'll see companies moving in that direction. I think a lot of the changes are going to be market-driven. I think the demands placed in our industry by dentists in looking for that better mousetrap or that better widget, I think will provide the resources that our companies need to move into that direction. Just the change in as I mentioned earlier, high-speed dental handpieces over the years, and that has been a dramatic evolution.
A blessing.
Yeah, it's been a blessing. I remember as a young man, and this is certainly not in no way, shape, or form as a criticism, but I remember going to the dentist when I was 10 or 11 years old, and I used to remember smoke coming out of my mouth, and I used to be a little bit more worried and concerned. But I trusted my dentist when I was 11, 12 years old. Why? Because to me, in those early years, and I'm not saying this because I've now got a little more knowledge about the dental community, but in those years I trusted my doctor, I trusted my dentist, and I still do. I go to the optometrist, I go to the dentist, I go to the doctor. For what reason? They are the professionals that are going to be taking care of something I need taken care of. Just as I trust members come to me because I've worked as hard as I can to become an association management professional to hopefully solve some of their problems. So I think you will always have that trust factor, and along with that comes a desire on the part of our industries to make a better product. So I think the market will drive that. Dental research will also drive that. The work that is being conducted by some of the best clinicians in the world, the continuing work in providing better materials and testing better materials and new products. So I think it's a partnership between the profession and the industry, and just in the last few years, you've seen dramatic changes in dentistry. The intraoral cam, for example, the X-ray, the developments in imaging, that's been dramatic advancements in dentistry. Dental chairs, some of the changes in dental chairs and cabinetry and instruments, it's evolved very dramatically. So it's kind of an exciting future, I think, for our industry and for the profession.
Well, just a little bit of a switch, but still along not the materials and equipment, but we also have quite an impact on the profession from advertising. And as in most forms of advertising, sometimes you're a little bit skeptical about what you read about this particular product or this particular piece of equipment. Does your association have any input to your group as to what type, or kind of like a truth and lending contract thing, of the truth and the validity of what they're advertising?
As an association, we have not. I think we have to be very careful as to what is our role as a trade association, and we are not in a position to suggest to companies how they should market products and how they should advertise products, because obviously we are bound by very stringent antitrust regulations. I think that takes care of itself in a number of ways. For example, as everyone knows, for a company to advertise in JADA, the Journal of the American Dental Association, they have to meet specific stringent guidelines to their approval certification process. So that is one system of checks and balances. I think the other system of checks and balances is when I think a customer sees an advertisement. The proof of the pudding really is when the dental distributor sales representative or manufacturer sales representative visits the dentist. Questions should be then asked about the efficiency of a product, the history of the product. And I think a lot of it boils down to the acumen of the sales representative and how well educated is the sales representative, not only on his or her company's products, but on other competitors' products. And I think the skilled salesperson will be able to present to the members of the profession examples, case studies, and present the kind of information that will help the dentist then make a value judgment or a professional judgment as to which product they should buy, and not just price. I think the old adage of price is king, I don't think really exists. I think you're looking at value-added service. You're looking at good products that have lasted through the test of time and are going to last in the future. So we don't get involved. Going back to your earlier question, I would tell you that is not our responsibility as a trade association. I think that'll take care of itself, quite frankly. I think the irresponsible companies, and I think any industry has, unfortunately, those companies that perhaps are not doing what they should be doing. I don't think you'll see them around in a couple of years from now.
Probably very true. I know that you were instrumental in the formation of the International Association of Dental Manufacturers. Here you're representing the American Trade Association, and now you're getting into the International Association. Do you have to walk a thin line here to keep these in balance, or can you?
Yes, we do.
You do. Tell me a little bit about that.
Now I'm working Sundays also, not just on Saturdays. That's very exciting for us, Bill, for a number of reasons. You refer to an organization called the International Dental Manufacturers, which was informally started about 8 years ago, but was formalized 3 years ago with its own constitution, its own bylaws. And let me kind of in a nutshell explain to you what that's all about. As the dental community began to shrink and we needed to address ourselves globally, we initially were very concerned about meetings that were overlapping throughout the world, particularly from the manufacturer's point of view, or for that matter, even from the practitioner's point of view. You had the American Dental Association maybe meeting at the same time that the FDI was meeting, the International Association, and you had a proliferation of meetings, and consequently the problem we faced, particularly the exhibitors, the companies that support trade shows, we were facing the problem of expenses becoming prohibitive, and you wound up looking at two major meetings that were being held simultaneously at two different parts of the world. So the initial thrust of the formation of the IDM was to try to collate and work with all of the sponsors of international trade shows, an international calendar of meetings, to try to avoid conflicts in dates. That was the beginning of it. We then obviously became very concerned about regulations that were being introduced in various countries that made it very difficult for companies to market their products in those countries overseas. So we felt that we needed to get ourselves involved in coalition building. We identified, we meaning, we looked at every international trade association representing the industry that had a staff. It was the Australian Dental Industry Association, it was the Japan Dental Trade Association, it was FIDA, which is the European Association of Dental Manufacturers, and in the United States you had the American Dental Trade Association and our sister organization called the Dental Manufacturers of America. We collectively got together and after a series of meetings decided that we should form the IDM. and have each organization suggest individuals that would serve on the board of the IDM from that country. So each of these organizations that I mentioned to you have 3 official representatives that serve for a 2-year period on the board of directors, and then we shift from country to country as far as the secretariat is concerned. The first 2 years, the organization's president was Antoine de Hollesie from Holland, and the secretary was Dr. Edward Schills from the Dental Manufacturers of America in Pennsylvania. And those were the formative years when we were just structuring the IDM. Last year, Mr. Bert Borgel, the chairman of Dentsply International, became the president for a 2-year period, and I became the secretary, the staff manager for 2 years. And it's very exciting because I think what we have developed is an international voice for the dental industry. And I think that in itself is very, very important, because instead of having a variety of groups speaking on behalf of the industry, and then the question comes up, are you speaking, for whom are you really speaking? Are you speaking for your own constituent and or globally? We now can speak globally, and good evidence of that is when we met with the officers of the FDI 2 years ago, and we now have an ongoing relationship with Dr. Per Akizel and the executive director of FDI and with their officers, and we meet annually at the Chicago Midwinter meeting and have an agenda and identify problems internationally that we can deal with, or at least begin working on, that will benefit everyone, not only the international dental industry, but the international community. But we have a voice. And again, it's in its formative years, and it's just like the ADTA in some pockets of the dental community. A lot of people do not know about us. They do not know we exist. But as we evolve and our agenda expands, I think we'll make a significant positive impact on the whole community. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, of course, we have to remember that we are part of the international community.
Absolutely.
We kind of get to thinking that we're the community and the rest are international, but we are of the whole, so that
we cannot afford to isolate ourselves. And again, here's one of the new challenges. You know, every so often a challenge is presented, and it's a question of how do we, as organizations, respond to that challenge. I'm very excited by the enthusiasm and the zeal with which international companies have embraced the idea of an IDM, and the fact that we have a democratic structure in place, and we do meet periodically. We meet twice a year as a board, once in the United States and once in Europe, usually during the FDI meeting. We met in Berlin, and 2 years from now we'll meet in Gothenburg, Sweden. So it's, and that's very exciting, and then that's another opportunity.
Well, back to the your own organization here, I know that some of the things that we haven't mentioned here was some of the major projects that directly concern the dental profession that you all promote and support. Would you like to say a few words about?
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to go back to, we had talked about the SELECT program, career opportunities. We've talked a little bit about the role of the American Fund for Dental Health. I think we've talked about the success seminars, the practice management seminars for junior and senior dental students that are held, I believe, in approximately 30 or 35 locations throughout the year. And recognition is given at those programs to the junior and senior dental students as to the role that we play as an industry. And I think there is a good example of expanding the perception of what is the role of the industry to the dental student. Another activity we're very excited about is what we call the DentaCheck program. The DentaCheck program is now in its 3rd year. It was initially developed by the National Foundation of Dentistry for the Handicapped, Dr. Larry Coffey out of Denver, Colorado. And the goal of the DentaCheck program is very simple. The goal is to develop a coupon product buying book that we can sell at various trade shows or directly to a dentist. And the book contains coupons, the value of which may be worth anywhere from $5,000 to $6,000 or $7,000 in terms of products that our industry provides at a reduced cost, or for that matter, at sometimes no expense. The cost of the book is $55 to the purchaser of the book. And I'm very proud to say that the first year we generated approximately $60,000, all of which went to the Foundation of Dentistry for the Handicapped. And I'm proud to say that, when we developed the book, the developmental costs and the publishing costs are taken care of by the Foundation of Dentistry for the Handicapped, that every single nickel that comes out of the sales of the book goes right back to the National Foundation of Dentistry for the Handicapped. And this year we're targeting approximately $100,000 that'll go back to helping the foundation. And I think because we're in our 3rd year and it's a new project and it's an evolving project, probably within another 2 or 3 years, it hopefully will become a household word. And I personally am going to be very proud of being involved in a project that helps the handicapped and the indigent. And it's another, I think, extension of the role that we as an industry can play, not locally, regionally, but nationally and internationally. One of the concerns I've always had since I've been with this organization is in the early years, we used to always be inundated with requests for money. People would call us and say, well, the industry's loaded, they've got a lot of money. And what we tried to do was, instead of just writing checks all the time, anytime somebody wanted money, we became very selective and started to prioritize. But to expand our priorities and sit down and talk to organizations that were developing projects that we felt were not only worthwhile, but would do the most good for the largest potential number of recipients of that benefit. I can go back 15 years ago and tell you the only thing we were involved in then was the American Fund for Dental Health. Now we have 5 or 6 specific projects that probably generate $500,000 a year in revenues that go into the support of other beneficial projects. And that's exciting, and I enjoy doing that. It makes me feel good, too. It makes our members feel good.
I have a couple of things here that I've kind of kept till the last here, Nick, and I want to read this because I want it to come out right, because it gets a little bit personal, and you may not even want it. You may not even want to address it. But do you believe your past contributions and in your present position, you have, to your own satisfaction, made a difference?
Oh,
that's a tough one.
That's a good question. It's an excellent question. I think I can begin answering by saying that having stayed with ADT 15 years, to me at least, is an endorsement of my contribution by the leadership of ADT. I don't think I could have survived 15 years if I had not contributed and perhaps done the right thing. And I think included in that comment would be, I think I have made a difference. I'd like to think I've made a difference. I think I can make an even more significant difference. My job is not over by any stretch of the imagination. I think what I'm very proud of, Bill, is that I know a lot more today about the dental community and the dental profession and the dental industry than I ever knew before. After all, I came on the scene as an association manager with no knowledge whatsoever of dentistry other than as a consumer of dental services. And over the years, as I've learned more about the dental community, and I've had tremendous guidance and direction and input by members of the dental profession. And I would say to you that in addition to the members of the dental industry that have been very helpful to me in my career, I couldn't have done what I've done and the contributions that I made if it wasn't for mentoring by some very, very important people in dentistry, both in the profession, in the schools, and in the laboratories, and all pockets of dentistry. That has been exciting, the way in which people have responded to my call and to the call of our members and to the call of the industry. And I think the signals that I'm receiving, for the most part, are positive signals, and I like to think I've made a difference. I've made an awful lot of mistakes, and I think you learn through those mistakes. I look back on some of the things that I perhaps should have done a little bit differently. Maybe sometimes I was quick to rush to judgment. Maybe sometimes I did not respond quickly enough. But hopefully I've worked very hard to establish a good reputation, and that reputation perhaps can help me do more in the future, perhaps has added credibility. I think this interview, as I told you earlier, I'm honored and I'm pleased, and I'm somewhat concerned that maybe I'm not worthy of being chosen by the college for the interview, but that I think is a reinforcement of what we've tried to do, not only individually, but as a trade association. And having survived 15 years, I'm kind of looking forward to perhaps another 15 years, and I'm excited about it, I think, what we can do in the future. So I'd like to think I've made a difference, and the job isn't done. There's a lot to do.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because it's difficult to talk about yourself. I know this is a very difficult question, but I appreciate your honesty in your answering, and it's going to make a difference, I'm sure.
Well, so far the good has outweighed the mistakes.
There you go. So, and we learn by
kept
mistakes.
the mistakes to a minimum.
And those of us who have never made a mistake, where are we? You know?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I saved the best till last.
Oh.
The very, very best. And I know your wife, Paula, has been very close and very cooperative and very understanding, because I know your job does call you away a lot, and late. Like I said, I didn't know whether you were going to make it back from Chicago last night or not, but you made it. And I know from just hearsay that there's quite a close relationship, and then particularly when we were talking and you told me she was from Oklahoma, I knew she was a lovely person. So just a little bit of personal about some of your hobbies and things that you two like to do, and just a little something.
Well, you're kind to bring her up. Yeah. She's my life, without question. I look back on the 22 years that we've been partners. We just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary in July, and I met her 22 years ago. She's been crucial to me in many ways. She's a partner with me in the business sense, in that she attends many meetings during the year. She's gotten to know many people in the dental community, many of our members and many of our friends, and she's been very important. I met her at a convention.
There you go.
Yeah. She had a very exciting profession, her own profession. Before I met her, she was a commercial television model and was doing some work for the Hyatt Hotel Corporation. And I came to an annual convention here in Washington, and the sales representative who was calling on the association that I was working for said, "I'd like you to introduce you to one of our people from the corporate office." And Bill, honestly, I met her at lunch and I fell in love with her immediately. My only concern was I didn't think she wanted anything to do with me. I didn't think I could live up to her expectations.
Well, no Russian immigrant like you.
Trying to get along, right?
Trying to get along.
Try to get along. And she has absolutely turned my life around. I think what she has done for me is not only is she there for me all the time, but I think the times when I've been a little bit concerned about embracing a risk, maybe going a little bit too far, worrying about how a decision would impact on my present career, let alone my future career. She has been a great source of inspiration. She has been very helpful in pushing me to take that risk. And I will say to you that when I was considering changing jobs when I first met Paul, and I was going from Eastern Airlines I was offered a job at the American Nursing Home Association back in the early 70s. I was very concerned. I didn't have enough confidence that I could perform the job that I was being interviewed for. She pushed me. She made it happen. She somewhat embarrassed me that I did not have enough confidence in myself as she had in me. And I will always look back at that because it again reminded me that if you don't take risks, and if you don't take that appropriate turn in the road, you're never going to achieve anything. You're never going to be successful. Risk-taking, I think, is a key ingredient in the management, particularly in my case of an association and in working with your members. She also introduced me, by the way, 5 years ago to golf.
There you go.
We both play golf. I would say to you unequivocally that she is a better golfer than I am, and I'm proud of that. We both carry a 12 handicap. She beats me all the time, and I don't have any problem with that. But she introduced me to golf because I really needed a sideline. I was working for the association, and in my spare time was involved in voluntary activities, and I really had no other life. And I think that introduction provides me with a balance that is very important. We do not have children. We do not have children. As a result, we're very close to one another. We spend an awful lot of time together. And golf has given us an opportunity to do things together when we travel. And it's been an exciting part of my life. Also, as you know, golf not only affords business opportunities, but it's a great character building, because I found out a long time ago the way you react to whether you hit a bad shot tells other people a great deal about you as an individual.
Right. If you don't wrap that club around the tree,
exactly.
gives you a good insight as to what's going on with the other executive.
Yeah. So she's played a very important role in my life, and hopefully will continue for many years to come.
That's wonderful. Nick, I want to tell you that this has been a most enjoyable and informative
thank you.
Conversation. That's what we call these interviews, or conversations with different individuals. And that's what we hope they come across as, a conversation. And you certainly have enlightened me as a practicing dentist as to what the American Dental Trade Association is, and I'm going to take the message back, and I think this videotape will enlighten a lot of the profession as to what you guys are really up to and what you're doing, and the close cooperation you are having with the profession. And I want to thank you
Well,
personally
Bill, I appreciate
for
it.
being here with us.
Thank you.
And
This was
it was
marvelous.
a great interview for
Thank
me.
you.
I
Thank
hope for you too.
It was, and on behalf of the membership of ADTA, and for that matter, the dental industry as a whole, I appreciate this opportunity. I think we have a very important message, and I'm proud that you chose me to be able to share the message with you, because I'm proud of the membership that I represent and the dental community as a whole. This has been a wonderful experience. I thank you for that, and the college.
Thank you, Nick.
Pleasure.